The worn floorboards of the spare room groaned under Bianca's weight, a symphony of resentment accompanying each strained ply. Sweat beaded on her brow, but it wasn't the heat of exertion that flushed her cheeks, it was the cold fire of a 2-decade-old grudge. Her reflection in the dusty mirror was a cruel mimic of the dancer she once was, her movements sharp but devoid of joy. Years ago, Aurora Versa had stolen the spotlight, the lead role, the entire world, Bianca's world. Everything, she hissed to the ghost in the glass, her spin ending in a bitter and steady pose. The glory, the acclaim, the riches, it will all belong to my daughter, to my legacy. The name Aurora Versa was a curse on her lips, a poison she'd been nursing for years, convinced that Kiki Green, Aurora's celebrated prodigy, was the living embodiment of her stolen triumph. Years later, that same poison seeped into the polished halls of the Aurora Versa Dance Academy. Victoria Collins, however, knew nothing of it. Her world was the scent of lemon floor cleaner and the quiet rhythm of a buffer machine. As a cleaner, she was invisible, a ghost in grey overalls who haunted the periphery of a world she desperately longed to join. From the shadows of the doorway, she watched the elite students, her heart aching with a familiar mix of envy and admiration. Today, Kiki Green held center stage. She was a whirlwind of controlled energy, her limbs cutting through the air with practiced precision. But as she launched into a complex series of fouette turns, Victoria's practiced eye caught the floor, a subtle shift in her center of gravity, a barely perceptible wobble that threw her axis off kilter. It was a mistake born of arrogance, not inability. Before she could stop herself, the words escaped her lips, a soft but clear instruction cutting through the music. Your supporting leg gets locking. Keep the knee soft, or you'll lose your momentum. The music screeched to a halt. Every head in the room swiveled towards the doorway. Kiki, flushed and thrown, glared at the source of the interruption. Her eyes narrowed when she saw who it was. Excuse me, did the cleaner just offer me a correction? A wave of snickers rippled through the other dancers. Victoria shrank back, heat flooding her face. I'm sorry. I didn't mean. Then don't, Kiki snapped, tossing her ponytail over her shoulder. Stick to your mops and buckets. Some of us have actual work to do. But one person wasn't laughing. From her chair in the corner, Aurora Versa watched the exchange, her expression unreadable. She had seen the flaw, too, but the cleaner had seen it first. Her gaze lingered on Victoria, a flicker of thoughtful curiosity in her otherwise stoic eyes. As the class resumed, Aurora rose and approached Victoria, who was now scrubbing a scuff mark with frantic energy. Without a word, Aurora extended a small, sealed packet. It was an antihistamine. For the mangoes in the staff lounge fruit bowl, she said, her voice a low, calm melody. I noticed you were sneezing. I have the same allergy. Victoria stared at the packet, then at the legendary director. It was a bizarre, unexpected moment of connection. The air in the audition hall hummed with a toxic blend of hairspray and ambition. Victoria Collins clutched the worn strap of her duffel bag, her knuckles white. She felt like a stray cat that had wandered into a lion's den. Every other dancer was a vision in designer leotards and brand new point shoes, their laughter sharp and confident. Victoria's own dance shoes, lovingly repaired with glue and thread more times than she could count, felt like a scarlet letter on her feet. Look what the garbage truck dragged in, a voice sneered, dripping with manufactured pity. Victoria's head snapped up. Kiki Green stood at the center of a small, adoring clique, her posture perfect, her expression a mask of contempt. She was Aurora Versa's daughter, dance royalty, and she wore her privilege like a second skin. One of Kiki's friends, a blonde with a vicious smile, chimed in, a voice loud enough for the entire waiting area to hear. Honestly, Some people have no shame. Coming here looking like a junk collector, are you trying to get the pity vote? Victoria's cheeks burned, but she straightened her spine. Years of Bianca's casual cruelty had forged an armor around her heart. She met Kiki's gaze directly. Real talent isn't about expensive attire, Kiki. It's about what you do when the music starts. She let a small, pointed smile touch her lips. Something you can't buy, no matter how famous your mother is. The jab landed precisely where she'd aimed. A flicker of raw fury crossed Kiki's face before she smoothed it over with a practiced, icy calm. The girls around her gasped. "You're just a puppet on strings," Victoria added, her voice dropping to a low, intense whisper that cut through the surrounding chatter. "Perfectly polished, but someone else is always pulling." That was the breaking point. The veneer of polite disdain shattered. "A puppet," Kiki's voice was a venomous hiss. "You think you're better than me, you, with your street corner pirouettes and self-taught nonsense. Fine. Let's settle this where it matters." On the stage, Kiki stepped closer, invading Victoria's personal space. "I've been training at the most exclusive conservatories since I could walk. My mother is aura versa. When I'm done, you'll realize your amateur tricks are an insult to this art form. You'll be laughed out of this building." Victoria didn't flinch. She held Kiki's furious gaze for a beat longer, a quiet storm brewing in her own eyes. Then, she stepped back, her composure a stark contrast to Kiki's trembling rage. "You should probably warm up your ankles," she said, her tone deceptively gentle. "You tend to lose your balance on your triple spins when you're angry." She turned and walked away, leaving Kiki sputtering in her wake, the targeted insult having struck a nerve of genuine insecurity. On stage, Kiki was a marvel of technical precision, performing a classical piece from Don Quixote. Every extension was flawless, every turn perfectly centered. Her movements were clean, sharp, and textbook perfect. The judges, a panel of 3 stern-faced traditionalists, nodded in approval, making notes on their clipboards. She finished with a flourish, her chin high, a triumphant smirk aimed directly at Victoria, who watched from the wings. But on the judging panel, Aurora Versa's expression was unreadable. She saw the flawless execution, the years of grueling, expensive training, but she also saw the absence of a soul. It was a perfect recitation of a poem with no understanding of the words. It was beautiful, but it was hollow. Then, it was Victoria's turn. The number on her plain black leotard felt like a brand. She took her place at the center of the vast, empty stage, the silence of the auditorium pressing in on her. The music began a haunting, melancholic piano melody she'd composed in her head during sleepless nights. Her piece was called Cage Bird. Her first movement was jarring, a sharp, angular contraction of her torso. It was not graceful in the classical sense. It was pained. Her dance told a story of being trapped, of beating against invisible bars. A turn was intentionally thrown slightly off balance, conveying a desperate stumble. One hand remained curled, a finger hooked, as if permanently misshapen from grasping at something just out of reach. It was raw, emotional, and utterly captivating. She wasn't just dancing, she was bleeding her story onto the stage. When the music faded, Victoria was left heaving for breath, her body trembling with the emotional aftermath. The auditorium was silent for a long moment. "Unconventional," one of the male judges finally said, his tone dismissive. "Her lines are broken. Her technique is undisciplined. It's all arbitrary self-expression. We are looking for dancers, not emotional exhibitionists." "I agree," the second judge chimed in. "There are clear self-taught imperfections. Passion is no substitute for discipline." Kiki, watching from the side, allowed a victorious smile to spread across her face. It was over. But then, Aurora Versa leaned into her microphone, her voice resonating with a quiet authority that commanded the room. Were her lines broken, or were they expressing the contortions of a struggle? You call that hooked finger an imperfection. I call it character. It's the hand of a bird that has been gripping the bars of its cage for so long it has forgotten how to open fully. The other judges stared at her, stunned. Her off-angle turns, Aurora continued, her eyes fixed on Victoria, who looked up in disbelief. Were they mistakes, or were they the desperate lunges of a creature fighting for freedom? You see a lack of discipline. I see a story. I see the spirit of dance, which is far more vital than a set of rigid, outdated rules. A heated, whispered debate erupted among the judges. Kiki's face had drained of all color. This wasn't possible. Her mother was supposed to champion her. Finally, Aurora silenced them. The vote is 2 against 1. However, as the director of this academy, I reserve one discretionary pick for a dancer who shows exceptional promise. The kind of promise that cannot be taught. She looked directly at Victoria, her gaze piercing, empathetic. Miss Collins, you have been granted an auditing qualification. You will attend all classes, but you will have to earn your permanent place. She clicked off her microphone and then, speaking to Victoria as if they were the only 2 people in the room, she added a final, cryptic encouragement. You showed us the cage. Now, show us you know how to break free from your chains. The administrator's voice was a sterile blade, slicing through the whispers that filled the practice room corridor. Suspended. 1 week. Effective immediately. Victoria stood frozen. The words of physical blow. Around her, Kiki sobbed into the shoulder of a fellow dancer, her performance of victimhood flawless. Kiki's clique formed a protective wall, their glares like daggers aimed at Victoria. The evidence a single, deliberate scuff mark on Kiki's imported leather dance shoes was all it took to seal her fate. It was a lie, a perfectly constructed one, and Victoria was trapped within it. Just as the humiliation began to curdle into a cold, desolate numbness, a new voice, sharp and venomous, cut through the air. Victoria Collins. Bianca. A wave of dread washed over Victoria, colder than any administrator's verdict. Her adoptive mother stormed down the polished hallway, her face a mask of fury. She didn't slow, didn't ask a single question. Her hand shot out, fingers clamping around Victoria's arm like a vice. The grip was punishingly tight, nails digging into her skin. What did I tell you about causing trouble? Bianca hissed, her voice a low growl for all to hear. She began to drag Victoria toward the exit, a public shaming that drew every eye. You think you deserve to be here? With real dancers, you are nothing. A charity case I was foolish enough to take in. Victoria stumbled, her cheeks burning. It wasn't my fault. Silence. Bianca spun on her, her face inches from Victoria's. The smell of cheap perfume and rage was suffocating. You owe me everything. The roof over your head, the food you eat, the very air you breathe. Your life is mine to direct. And I say you are done with this foolish dream. You are not worthy of dance. You are worthy of nothing. The words were old weapons, sharpened over years of use, and they found their mark as surely as they always did. Victoria's spirit, already battered, began to crumble. That's enough. The voice was quiet but carried an undeniable authority that silenced the corridor. Aurora Versa, the Academy's legendary director, stepped forward. Her posture was impeccable, her gaze level and piercing. She looked not at the students, but directly at Bianca, her expression one of deep disapproval. This is a matter for the Academy to handle, Aurora said, her tone calm but firm. Victoria has a right to be here, and a right to defend herself. Bianca's eyes narrowed, a flicker of something ancient and bitter igniting in their depths. You have no say in this, she snarled, tightening her grip on Victoria. You, of all people, should know about staying out of other people's family business. She spat the words like a curse, a cryptic illusion that hung heavy in the air. You think your money and your name make you better. You took everything from me once. You will not take this. Aurora's composure wavered, a flicker of confusion and hurt crossing her features. Before she could respond, two security guards, alerted to the commotion, arrived and flanked Bianca. With practiced efficiency, they pried her fingers from Victoria's arm and escorted her, still shouting threats and insults, from the building. The great glass doors swung shut, leaving behind a stunned, echoing silence and a red, five-fingered mark on Victoria's skin. Later that night, the silence in Bianca's house was a heavy blanket. Victoria was rummaging through a dusty storage box in the attic, searching for an old textbook, when her fingers brushed against a worn cardboard folder. Inside was a small stack of faded photographs. One caught her eye. A picture of a baby, swaddled in a hospital blanket. A tiny, dark mole just visible on its left shoulder blade. It was a distinctive mark. A small constellation of 3 perfect dots. The same constellation she had seen 100 times on Bianca's shoulder in the summer when she wore sleeveless tops. But the baby in the photo was labeled with a hospital bracelet that read, "Baby girl Versa." Confused, Victoria flipped the photo over. Scrawled on the back in Bianca's handwriting were 2 words, "My Kiki." A jarring slam of the front door shattered her thoughts. Heavy footsteps thundered into the living room, followed by the crash of a lamp. Victoria crept to the top of the stairs, heart pounding. 2 brutish men in leather jackets had Bianca cornered. "Your husband's debt is our problem now," the larger one growled, his eyes scanning the cheap decor. "And your problem is us. We want 50,000 by Friday." Bianca was trembling, a stark contrast to the monster she'd been at the academy. "I don't have it. He's gone. He took everything." The man smiled, a cruel, predatory expression. "We know where your pretty little girl dances, the fancy one, Kiki. It would be a shame if something happened to her, an accident on her way home." Panic seized Bianca's features, a raw, primal fear Victoria had never seen before. "No, not Kiki. Please, I'll get the money. I promise. Just don't touch her." It was a desperate plea, a mother's love so fierce and absolute it made Victoria's stomach clench. It was a love Bianca had never, not once, shown her. The next day, Bianca appeared at the academy, her face pale and drawn. She carried a thermos, seeking out Kiki with a frantic energy. "I brought you soup," she said, her voice trembling as she offered it. "You need to keep your strength up." Kiki recoiled as if Bianca were diseased. "What are you doing here? Get away from me. You're embarrassing me." Tears streamed down Bianca's face. The carefully constructed walls of her life were collapsing. "Kiki, you have to listen to me. I need to tell you the truth." She fumbled in her purse, pulling out the faded photograph. "I'm your mother, your real mother." Kiki stared at the photo, then back at Bianca's tear-stained face, her own expression twisting from confusion to pure disgust. "You're insane," she spat, her voice dripping with venom. "You're fabricating this disgusting lie because you want money from Aurora. You are nothing to me." She shoved the photo back into Bianca's chest and stalked away, leaving Bianca to crumble in the hallway, clutching the thermos of soup she had made for a daughter who refused to see her. Word of the desperate claim spread through the academy like wildfire, eventually reaching Aurora Versa's office. The name Bianca, coupled with the claim of being Kiki's mother, snagged on a memory. A shared due date in a maternity ward all those years ago. A fleeting conversation with a bitter young woman who had lost everything. Then, another piece clicked into place, a stray comment from a coach about Kiki having to carry an EpiPen. Kiki's severe mango allergy, the same rare, hereditary allergy Victoria suffered from. It was a coincidence. It had to be. But the director, the woman who saw patterns in the chaos of choreography, could not ignore this. With a deep, unsettling feeling coiling in her gut, Aurora made a call. She arranged for 2 discrete DNA tests, one for Kiki, using a water bottle from her rehearsal bag, and one for Victoria, using a stray hair collected from a costume fitting. 2 days later, the results arrived in a sealed manila envelope. Alone in her vast, silent office, Aurora slid a letter opener under the flap. Her hands were steady, but her heart hammered against her ribs. She unfolded the first report. The clinical, black and white text was unequivocal. The probability of maternity between Aurora Versa and Kiki Versa was 0.0%. The paper trembled in her hand. Kiki was not her daughter. The child she had raised, loved, and championed was a stranger. An agonizing void opened within her, but it was instantly filled with a desperate, terrifying question. Her gaze drifted toward the window, down to the practice studios below. If Kiki wasn't hers, then who was? And what did the second envelope on her desk contain? The air backstage was thick with the scent of hairspray and nervous sweat, a toxic perfume that clung to the velvet curtains. Victoria Collins sat on a warm crate, her focus narrowed to the gentle rhythm of her own breathing, in, out. She tuned out the frantic whispers of stagehands and the muffled applause from the auditorium. Tonight was the final. Everything she had bled for, everything Bianca had tried to beat out of her, came down to the next 3 minutes. Nervous, Victoria looked up. Kiki stood before her, a bottle of brightly colored sports drink in her hand, her smile as artificial as the glitter on her eyelids. "You look thirsty," Kiki purred, offering the drink. "Last one. I saved it for you." Victoria hesitated. Kindness from Kiki was a Trojan horse. Still, her throat was dry, and the bottle was sealed. She took it with a quiet "thanks," twisted the cap, and took a small sip. The taste was wrong, too sweet, too familiar, an insidious fruity tang that immediately sent a prickle of alarm up her spine. The scent ate her a second later. Mango. A wave of dizziness washed over her as a familiar, terrifying itch began to bloom in her throat. She looked from the bottle to Kiki's triumphant smirk, and the pieces clicked into place. "You switched it," Victoria rasped, her voice already tightening. Kiki's smile widened, sharp and predatory. "I have no idea what you're talking about." She leaned in closer, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. "But it's a shame, isn't it? Such a severe allergy. A few more sips and you'd be in an ambulance instead of on that stage. The championship will look so much better on my mantelpiece." Panic flared in Victoria's chest, hot and suffocating. Her vision swam, but then a memory cut through the fog. Aurora Versa, the Academy's legendary director, pressing a small white pill into her palm just an hour ago. "You look pale, dear. Stress can weaken the immune system. This is just a powerful antihistamine. Take it, just in case." At the time, it had felt like an oddly specific gesture. Now, it felt like a miracle. The allergic reaction was still clawing at her, a fire in her veins, but the medicine was a shield, holding the worst of it at bay. She was weak, but she could stand, she could fight. "Your performance won't win you anything, Kiki," Victoria said, a voice strained but steady. "A copy is just a copy," Kiki laughed, a brittle, ugly sound. "We'll see." When Kiki took the stage, Victoria watched from the wings on a small monitor, a body trembling. Kiki was performing her dance, The Caged Bird, the choreography Victoria had poured her soul into. Every movement was technically perfect, every extension clean. But it was hollow, a beautiful, empty vessel. Kiki mimicked the anguish of a trapped bird, but her eyes were cold with ambition, not pain. She replicated the motions of breaking free, but she had never known a cage. The applause was polite, scattered, confused. On the monitor, Victoria saw the judges whispering to one another, their brows furrowed. They recognized the technical skill, that the soul of the piece was missing. It was a ghost of a dance. Backstage, Kiki ripped off her headpiece, her face contorted with rage. She had done it. She had performed the dance flawlessly. Why weren't they cheering? Why did she feel like a fraud? Her eyes darted to the monitor, where the judges' scores were a cascade of disappointing numbers. Her plan was unraveling. Her gaze fell on Victoria, who was now being helped toward the stage entrance by a crew member, and a chilling realization dawned on her. Victoria's talent wasn't in the steps. It was in the story only she could tell. It was unstealable, and now, the announcer's voice boomed, performing her original piece, Victoria Collins. Victoria stepped into the brilliant white light. For a long moment, she just stood there, her chest heaving, the remnants of the poison still clouding her senses. A murmur rippled through the audience. Was she forfeiting? Was she too ill to continue? Then, the music began, a haunting, melancholic piano melody. She didn't launch into the cage bird as planned. Instead, she let her body move, improvising a new story on the spot. This was not the dance of a bird in a cage. This was the dance of a bird that had been poisoned, fighting to fly one last time. Her movements were raw, desperate, tinged with the very real tremor in her limbs. She spun, a whirlwind of pain and defiance, and then executed a move that made the entire auditorium hold its breath. A seamless drop into a backbend, her arms arching not like wings, but like shattered branches, before snapping back up with a surge of impossible power. In the front row, Aurora Versa gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. It was her move. The iconic sequence from the gold medal performance had made her a legend decades ago, a move born from her own secret agony, one she had never taught to a single soul. Yet here it was, reborn in this girl, infused with a new, heartbreaking resilience. Victoria wasn't just dancing. She was speaking a language Aurora had thought was hers alone. She's breaking my chains, Aurora thought, tears blurring her vision. For 20 years, she had been trapped by her own past, by a loss she couldn't name. Watching Victoria, she felt the rust on those chains begin to crumble. She saw her own struggle, her own fight, her own triumph reflected in the girl's every movement. A profound, inexplicable connection bloomed in her chest, fierce and undeniable. As Victoria's performance swelled to its gut-wrenching climax, a silent drama began to unfold on the large screens flanking the stage. They were meant to show artistic close-ups of the performer, but a different feed had been discreetly patched in. Grainy security footage flickered to life. Kiki, her face a mask of contempt, shoving Victoria down a flight of stairs weeks ago. Kiki, in the dim backstage light just moments earlier, swapping the labels onto drink bottles. Kiki, smirking as Victoria drank the poison. The audience saw it first. A few scattered gasps, then a wave of shocked murmurs that grew into a low, angry hum. The judges' heads snapped from Victoria's transcendent form to the damning evidence on the screens. The stark contrast was breathtaking. On stage, an angel forged in fire. On screen, a devil cloaked in glitter. The truth, raw and irrefutable, was laid bare for all to see. Just as Victoria held her final, trembling pose, a fallen but unconquered warrior bathed in the sudden, roaring applause of a world that was finally seeing her. The final note of Victoria's performance hung in the air, a shimmering thread of sound that seemed to hold every heart in the auditorium captive. On stage, bathed in the white-hot glow of the spotlights, she stood with her chest heaving, sweat tracing clean paths through the stage makeup on her temples. The roar of the crowd was a physical force, a wave of validation that washed over her, and for a breathtaking moment, the years of pain, the loneliness, the endless bruises both seen and unseen vanish. She had danced her truth, and they had seen it. In the front row, Aurora Verse's applause was a fraction of a second behind everyone else's. She was watching Victoria, but her eyes were unfocused, her mind reeling. Moments before, as Victoria had executed a flawless, gravity-defying leap, Aurora's phone had buzzed with an email. The subject line a clinical, heart-stopping declaration. DNA analysis. Confidential. Her fingers, usually so steady, had trembled as she opened it. The report was brief, a cold collection of data and percentages. But one line burned itself into her soul. Probability of maternity. 99.999%. The world tilted. The brilliant, broken girl on stage, the one with the fire in her eyes that so unnervingly mirrored her own. The one whose every movement seemed an extension of a melody only they could hear, was not just a prodigy. She was a memory. A ghost. She was her daughter. As Victoria took a final, deep bow, Aurora rose from her seat, her pose a fragile veneer over the tectonic shift that had just occurred within her. She moved with purpose, her path not towards the stage, but to the wings, where Bianca was already preening, accepting premature congratulations for Kiki's technically proficient but soulless performance. Bianca, Aurora's voice was low, cutting through the backstage chatter like chilled steel. Bianca turned, a triumphant smirk plastered on her face. Aurora, a magnificent show. Kiki was simply born for this, wasn't she? Aurora didn't answer. Instead, she held up her tablet, the screen glowing in the dim light. On it, grainy, time-stamped surveillance footage played. A sterile hospital corridor, 20 years in the past. A nurse's station, momentarily empty. And then, a younger Bianca, her face a mask of furtive anxiety, pushing to bassinets. A swift, almost imperceptible glance over her shoulder, and then the sickeningly simple act, lifting one swaddled infant from its labeled cart and switching it with another. Bianca's smile froze, then melted away, leaving behind the raw, ugly foundation of her true self. What is this? Some kind of joke? That's not. Don't, Aurora interrupted, a voice dropping to a near whisper, yet carrying more weight than a scream. I have the original hospital logs, the security archives, the DNA test confirming Victoria is my child. She took a step closer, her gaze unwavering. The only thing I don't have is a reason. Why, Bianca? Why would you do this? For a moment, Bianca seemed to shrink, the years of carefully constructed superiority collapsing around her. Then, a venomous resentment, nurtured for 2 decades in the dark, finally spilled out. Her laugh was a brittle, cracking sound. Why? Because you had everything, Aurora. You always had everything. The career, the acclaim, the perfect life. You probably don't even remember me from the national auditions in '98. You cut me in the first round. A flick of your wrist, and my entire life was over. Aurora stared, uncomprehending. That's what this is about, an audition. It was never just an audition. Bianca shrieked, her voice raw with a lifetime of perceived slights. It was about respect. You looked right through me, so I decided my daughter, my Kiki, would have the life your daughter was meant to have. She would have the best training, the best name, the Versa legacy, and your precious prodigy. I wanted her to know what it felt like to be nothing, to have a gift and know where to put it, but in the dirt. Her confession hung in the air, a toxic cloud of bitterness and jealousy. On stage, the master of ceremonies was preparing to announce the winner. The grand trophy gleamed under the lights. Kiki stood beside him, radiating an unearned confidence, her smile practiced and ready. But before the NC could open the envelope, Aurora Versa strode onto the stage. Taking the microphone from his startled hand, a hush fell over the auditorium. The director of the entire academy had never interrupted the ceremony before. Before we announced the winner of the Grand Prix, Aurora began, her voice amplify, resonating with a calm, unshakable authority. There is a matter of profound importance that must be addressed, an injustice that has spanned 2 decades. She turned her gaze to Victoria, who stood stunned and confused at the side of the stage. For 20 years, I believed my daughter was lost to me. Tonight, I have learned that she has been here all along, fighting for her dream against unimaginable odds. Aurora's voice cracked for a single, vulnerable second. She took a breath and looked out at the sea of faces. The exceptionally gifted young woman you saw dance her heart out tonight. Victoria Collins is my daughter. A collective gasp swept through the audience. Cameras flash, Kiki's face contorted, her smug certainty shattering into a mosaic of disbelief and fury. That Victoria's expression was one of pure, heartbreaking bewilderment. Her eyes, wide and luminous with unused tears, were fixed on Aurora. Therefore, Aurora continued, her voice ringing with conviction, "It is with immense pride and a deep sense of restored justice that I make this announcement. The true winner of the Versa Grand Prix is Victoria Collins." The applause was thunderous, a tidal wave of sound and emotion that was less about a competition and more about the triumph of a human spirit. Victoria stood frozen, the roar of the crowd a distant hum. Daughter, the word echoed in the silent chambers of her heart, a place that had been empty for as long as she could remember. Aurora crossed the stage, bypassing the trophy, her eyes locked with Victoria's. The world seemed to melt away, leaving only the two of them in the glare of the spotlight. She stopped just before her, her hand rising tentatively to cup Victoria's cheek. The touch was gentle. "Reverend, my girl," Aurora whispered, her own tears finally breaking free. "I found you." The dam inside Victoria broke. The years of yearning, of wondering why she felt so utterly alone, of dreaming of a mother's touch, it all culminated in a single, choked sob. "Mum." The word was a fragile prayer, a question she had been too afraid to ever ask. Aurora pulled her into an embrace, and Victoria didn't just hug her back. She collapsed into her, burying her face in her mother's shoulder. It felt like coming home to a place she'd never been. The scent of jasmine and sandalwood, the strength in the arms that held her, the steady beat of a heart that somehow matched the rhythm of her own. It was real. It was all real. The beautiful, poignant tableau was broken by the ugly reality playing out behind them. Stripped of her borrowed glory, Kiki stared at the trophy that would not be hers, her face pale with humiliation. The accolades, the title, her very identity had all been a lie. Her downfall was swift, but Bianca's was absolute. 2 uniformed security guards approached her in the wings, their presence quiet but non-negotiable. There was no struggle. Bianca's fight was over. As they escorted her away, she cast one final look towards the stage, not at Aurora, the object of her long-festering hatred, but at Victoria, who was still wrapped in her mother's arms. Bianca's expression was not one of remorse, but of cold, final defeat. Her reign of cruelty and deception was over, ending not with a bang, but with the silent, ignominious closing of a door. The noise of the world finally faded, leaving only the profound, beautiful silence of a mother and daughter, reunited at last.